Hi, thank you for coming. And I also wanted to thank the IMA and especially Alison Unruh for giving me the opportunity to do such a large-scale work in the entrance pavilion. So what I wanted to do tonight was just talk about a few projects and try to give you a little insight into my process. I don't really think of my works as like these finished types of works, more like open-ended sketches. So it's kind of nice. I was talking to one of the employees out there, and they said that people are always asking if it's finished or not, and so that's kind of like, I actually like that. And it's also nice that there's a piece of mine right outside, because it really is, for me, the most important thing is about the experience of being within the work. And I try to document my work as best as possible, so hopefully this will give you an okay idea. I thought that I would start with an early piece where I first started to really think about film during my process and how that could become really important in the development of the end result. And I wanted to, this is a film still from an Antonioni film called Red Desert from 1964. And there's a scene in the film that was particularly important for me in the development of this piece I'm going to talk about. And it is, there's this woman, and she's a married woman, and she's kind of friends with this man, and she's sort of having this like breakdown, and they're going to be together in this room and become more intimate, and the guy's kind of thinking, all right, now we're really going to kind of get it on, and she's like completely staring through him. So I was sort of thinking a lot about people in intimate settings, like close proximity, but completely like alienated from each other, disconnected, and how that, and so this is the piece. It's from 2006, and it's called Green Desert. And I guess I'll first just talk about the architecture of the piece. I like to start with a very simple structure. And this was the idea of four corners of a room turned into the center of the room with these emanating kind of arms where if it would form a hallway situation. And thinking about the scene in the film, I decided to shear off the height of the piece at kind of like an average eye level, and put these slotted glass pieces on, so that when viewers were kind of moving around the piece, it would be a very like, it would be an obvious interaction. The spaces that I'm interested in are like these, or for this particular piece, were kind of transitory spaces, and that was what the space in the scene was. It was like a hotel room, kind of a space where you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time, and that, like a hallway, something you're passing through, that was kind of what informed the color choices and the decorative elements. And so, again, thinking about these four corners as frames, and like the piece out there, and sort of it runs through my work in terms of thinking of the piece as like you're moving through a series of frames. So within each of these corners, there's certain elements that start repeating, like wallpapers, kind of tacky wallpaper, cheap mirror frames, that become like they're the same thing repeated, and they become kind of tweaked. And each, sorry, I'm holding all these scenarios here. I'm interested in these kind of raw, banal materials juxtaposed with more decorative elements. And this is another point in my work where, well, a literal point where I'm interested in this kind of idea of danger, or a personal negotiation with your own body as you're walking around the piece, kind of this heightened experience. And so again, getting back to the materials, like there's furs on the bottom, this creating a tension between the raw sheetrocks and plywood, and you know, along with the furs and the wallpaper, and this kind of creating this kind of tension. And then this piece, actually, this is a shot from PS1 from this year, where it was reinstalled, and I actually ended up elongating it. It was kind of nice that it got a little bit of a second life. And in this case, I added 4 more corners to create a longer hallway. And the connection was that I saw the first corners as you were kind of looking into the crevices, and you were in the first corners like relating to the room height of like where mirror frames would be, and in the second set of corners it became more about the table legs or coffee tables or looking down in a room. So I think I'll show, there's an example of like that, these kind of table legs stuck in there. This was also one of the first pieces where I started inverting like exterior, the idea of an exterior into the interior, and creating these crevices with certain like room types of personality elements shoved in. And I'm interested in kind of how when you take something into like its essential element, that it becomes kind of sad and melancholic and pathetic. And I just thought that like that leg sticking out of the sheetrock kind of had this really like sad, melancholic quality about it. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm interested in the very mundane in architecture, but also kind of the extraordinary or the more like fantastical kind of aspects in architecture, kind of more eccentric buildings. This is a folly, and follies were very popular in the 18th century in England and France, and they were kind of meant to be these decorations or ornaments in parks. But the most important thing for what I think about is they're also these constructed ruins. So this is a broken column, and it's basically about like creating this fake ruin. However, this is it actually was a house. This function as a house, and it's outside of Paris. But I think at this point, I actually tried to go see it, but I think at this point, like the constructed ruin really is a ruin, which is kind of interesting. But this is a building which directly influenced this piece that I'm going to talk about or show. And it's Bruno Taut's Glass House from 1914. And it was designed for a Werkbund exhibition in Cologne. And I'm sort of interested in this period of glass architecture. He was part of this group that glass architecture was kind of like this illuminating type of hopeful direction for emerging of art and architecture. It was kind of it was a reaction against brick architecture. And the idea of art being a luxury for just a few, Bruno Taut was really like, wanted to be more about an experience for the masses. Anyways, this building doesn't exist anymore, but I became interested in the idea of the plan, and the plan as potential for something. This is the plan of the dome. And I basically cut out of wallpaper the plan of the dome and put it on the wall, and then made this kind of somewhat of a domestic-sized table where the plan reflects into it. And this is called Plans That Have Fallen Through, and it's from 2006. And I'm giving a little bit of a pessimistic take on the potential of architectural plans, while still, paying homage to it. Okay. So this is a photograph of a site of a destroyed house that I actually saw, and I was very just struck by the almost cliched melancholic effects of it with the roses and the red paint, the molding. And so I was thinking about that, and it was in a state of uncertainty whether it was going to be ripped down or rehabilitated. So I was thinking about that, and then in combination with this other kind of singular building, which was designed by this Russian architect Melnikov in 1927, and it was his home and studio, but right now it sits on this plot of land that's really this expensive plot of land, and the family owns different parts of it, and so there was this dispute. Some of them wanted to tear it down, and some of them wanted to keep it. So I decided to make a piece that kind of used the formal elements from both of these images or ideas of these spaces. And so it doesn't look that great because it's in an art fair, but I was commissioned to do a piece for the Artist Space booth, and I thought of the way I could do something for an art fair instead of, art fairs usually want to welcome someone into the booth, so I kind of thought about making a wall that you would be able to perforate or go through, but have it be a little bit uncomfortable. And these are the mirrors that were taken from the hexagonal mirrors from the Melnikov house, along with the color scheme of the super like kind of intense, cheesy, romantic red. And that leads into this other piece that I did for the Whitney. It's kind of I see those pieces together, and it's getting away from the idea of talking about like these extraordinary architectures, but thinking about something completely banal and basic, which is a wall. So sort of thinking about this wall that was really an unpleasant color, this yellow institutional color, and repeating it 3 times so I would be able to create these hallways again. And totally lost track, sorry. And the main thing of the connection to the Folly is I thought of this as a constructed ruin because there was like torn wallpaper. It was being built up instead of being torn down, but meant to look like it was a ruin in a sense. And so each treatment of the mirrors is a little bit different for each wall. I was thinking about the dematerializing of the actual material, then how your body is reacts to it and how it sucks in the architecture around it. So there was one that was a more aggressive and gets back to the idea of danger and kind of this personal negotiation with your own self and fragility. Also, if anyone has any questions, you can ask me like in the middle. And there's moldings and ripped wallpapers. I definitely pick like used things and new things for a combination of that. This is from a solo show in 2007 called On Returning, which I had at Demille Terrasse. And for this show, I started thinking about the idea of the lost home or a meaningful home, a meaningful place that's been lost, and how your memory thinks about that space, how the remembering of it usually distorts what the space was actually like. And I'm from Connecticut, so it just happened that this house designed by Paul Rudolph was destroyed in Westport, Connecticut in early 2007. And Paul Rudolph is known for kind of a brutalist type of architecture, but this was somewhat of a devastating thing that this was torn down. But I ended up meeting this photographer who had gotten into the house and taken these like really amazing photos of this house. So I just started thinking about that and the fragility of architecture, even though I actually talked to the people that tore the house down. They said it was surprisingly like solid. So I did this thing with the facade, which was kind of a very basic Photoshop thing where I just mirrored it basically. And I decided that I was going to build out this image so that the facade of the house would become inverted into the center of the gallery. And there's definitely formal elements that I was thinking of and was connected to with the design of the house, like these slotted kind of planks, like holding each other up, and the columns are definitely like directly kind of influenced by his architectural language. And so this, the walls of the piece end up meeting in this kind of absurd activity where they're kind of folding out with this really fragile glass, and then they're connected with a brass hinge. And so these like gestures are really important to me. And then the facade of the interior elements are then placed on the exterior, where there's kind of, again, like a sad type of curtain and shag carpeting and some reclaimed elements that like sort of fetishized, broken windows and the little inserts. But the main idea of the piece is like that you keep kind of the viewer hopefully keeps like moving around it, and it does become a little disorienting. It does become like this little sort of psychological narrative. I'm very interested in somewhat of a narrative, but it to be a very fragmented type of narrative. And then other gestures, like the piece itself is mirroring each other, and then there is also this mirrored section which is mirroring the other side of it. So it's like these kind of theatrical gestures within the work. This is, I just wanted to talk for a second about the idea of sight. And I think a lot about sight. I don't think my work is sight specific, but I do, when I first start to design a piece, I think about where it's going to go, and it can be transferred out of that space. But this was a project I did at the University of Michigan Museum of Art, and it was going to be in this room that had these 2 glass walls. So I started thinking a lot about the volume on top of the glass walls, and thinking about designing a piece which would function as like you look at it and it's a total composition, it's a whole sort of thing, and then when you get inside it, it becomes broken down into details and fragments. And also, this is Mondrian, Pier and Ocean from 1915, and I think that I was just, again, like I look at these flat images and think about how I can build them out. And I also used to be a painter. I think drawing is really important in my sculptures. So this is what that piece became. It sort of has these like metal scaffolding parts that mirror on the top of with the white wood parts, and it's supporting a floating floor which is coming down to meet a floating ceiling, like this horizontal slice. I also wanted to force myself to work with the horizontal. And this is just a detail, like again, like a very mundane, familiar detail that you see all the time with scaffolding. And I inserted that into the piece by using these plexiglass blocks, which would reassert the fragility of the structure. And let's see. So basically, this piece became really reductive in what I added to it, and I was thinking about a space that was either a place where you were about to move into, which only had the fixtures, was like the bare minimum of layers, or it was something that was going to begin to get ripped off, or ripped apart and gutted and started over. So that's just the plan of the piece and the space. And again, these kind of really cheap decorative elements inserted within the rough to kind of create that tension and disorientation. This piece is pretty disorienting. And I'm actually going to show it again in New York in May in a different space, so it'll be interesting how that kind of plays out. And the beigeness, it was just, every time I added something to it, it seemed like it was too much, so it was a very reductive piece. It was at the University of Michigan Museum of Art. It's called UMA, I guess, and then it's going to be at D'Amelio Terrace in New York in May. This is a scene from the conversation, but I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't want to give too much away. But I think it'll make sense in terms of just like the point of a room where it's either going to get ripped apart or, like I said before. So now I'm going to get into a piece that was kind of the precursor for tenuous arrangements. And this is a scene from a film called Looker by Michael Crichton. It's from 1983. And it has to do with these women that are becoming, like there's this mathematical equation of how their faces need to be like perfect, and so they get plastic surgery for advertising and anything. But I was just really interested in in this woman, and I think also she's like the opposite of me, and kind of like is answering the door in her bikini and kind of really like free, and I don't know, I like to wear a lot of clothes. And anyways, it just seemed like she was very vulnerable, and this whole like setting was just so vulnerable, and in the end, of course, she is killed and goes out the window. So I started thinking about how to make a piece for this woman where the absence of this woman was there, but I was somehow able to create the presence of a character. That's just a really great shot. And so this is what I came up with, and sort of the first idea of how these pivoting windows could kind of work, and how to create this idea of vulnerability. And I started thinking of, the plywood with the wallpaper as these skins that kind of work against each other. And just by having this really thin sliver of a mirror, how that kind of like opens up, like it confuses what's solid and what's not. And it also forced me to work with color that I didn't really, it was kind of goes against my sensibility, which was good. And yeah, and as you can see, that kind of leads up to the piece outside. And I wanted to talk about, this is just some details. So the piece outside, Tenuous Arrangements, was inspired by this movie by Robert Altman called Three Women, and it's a pretty hard movie to watch. It's not like his best movie at all, but I saw it last summer, and it really struck me because it had this very dreamlike quality about it. It was very kind of unfinished. You're not really sure what's going on in it, and it actually, in reading about it, I guess he said that it came to him in a dream. So again, I was thinking of these characters from the film, and the three women can either be like seen as one woman and different sides of her, or there's kind of an identity theft which goes on between the characters. This is the Sissy Spacek character, which kind of became represented by the lavender in the piece. And then this is the Shelley Duvall character, and she is kind of a super sad character. She's really like, oh, I guess I didn't put in this picture, huh? There's a, oh yeah, if you see in the car, like there's her skirt is always like sticking out of the car door. It's kind of like that's just part of her person, and it's just sad. I don't know. And so she was the yellow, and then there's another woman in it who's pregnant, and she's a painter, and she's painting all these like really terrible paintings all over the place. But so I just wanted to make a piece that where the absence of these characters was felt in the color. And I hadn't before worked in a way where I did the whole piece on site. So I wasn't sure. I mean, I definitely had planned a lot of it, but there was some things that I left kind of open. And those things being that I got really into color. Again, like I said, that I had been a painter, but I actually, as a painter, I didn't really like color, so everything was always gray. But it was really exciting to kind of be in this in the room upstairs and really start to get into color. And there's some two-tone colors and then wallpapers, and kind of see how that developed. And it became for me not necessarily about adding in architectural details, but the spaces in between the crevices became more of an abstract space or an abstract idea of a room, or like this colored room. Anyways. And then I just wanted to end with, these are some smaller works. They're wall mirrors. And I kind of wanted to figure out a way to make something that was not always so big, but also functional. And so they're again touching on this somewhat aversion I have to the decorative, but always wanting to insert it into this more geometric and minimalist language, more of a formalist language. And sort of think about like getting what's behind the wall, or pulling out what might be there, having all these layers kind of hidden. This is definitely the idea of this kind of very minimalist situation facade, and then behind it is a much more decorative, kind of cheesy mirror, hidden. And then I just want to end with this painting by Matisse. It's also from 1915, which I thought was interesting, and it's called French Window at Collioure. Kind of the idea of the frame, the unknown, or what's beyond, and it's just very simple. So I guess now getting to the movie and why I chose it, I've always had a thing for 70s films. I think there's like a certain rawness to them, a grittiness to them, like Cassavetes or early Scorsese films. It's like people were being a little bit more experimental and just like out there. And but in particular, I really like these conspiracy films, like Clue and Parallax View and Chinatown. And I think that I chose The Conversation, which is directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It's from 1974, because of the kind of slow way that it gets under your skin. And you're not really sure what is real and what is imagined. And that's kind of something that I feel like I really aim to deal with in my work, the experience of that, and how you really start to doubt what you think you know about yourself, about space, and that's it.